hands who was here the first week. Okay. I don't think I have too many references to the first week, but if anyone has questions, like if I did make a reference and you're lost about it, then just raise your hand and I'll explain. Okay, so this week we're talking about carbs and proteins. Gonna get in a little bit to the functions of both, sources of both, and maybe debunk some myths on each of those. Okay, so starting off with carbs. So know your carbs. We've got different types of sugars up here. Glucose, fructose, galactose. Okay, those are monosaccharides. Don't worry, I'm not going to get crazy biochemistry on you, but I'm just going to plant the seed of some of these terms. Glycogen, okay, this is the storage form of glucose. Basically, glycogen is just a bunch of chains of glucose polymers, okay? Sucrose is like your table sugar, okay? So that's composed of fructose and glucose. And then lactose is glucose and galactose. We won't really talk too much about galactose though. So my main focus for today, we're going to be looking at glucose, fructose, and then we're also going to be talking about fiber, and that's going to be the composition of carbs. So, glucose, simple sugar, found in fruits, vegetables, starchy tubers, grains, and also sugar, okay? So, high fructose corn syrup or anything else that you have just your regular table sugar in. Glucose will be in that. Form structural molecules called glycoproteins in the body, and it's a main form of energy, okay? Breakdown of glucose results in something called ATP, which is the energy in your body. It also has various other roles, some of which have to do with a precursor for metabolic functions with your immune system, okay? You can actually produce glucose within your body. So some people argue that it's like, then you don't need to necessarily take it exogenously, so like by food or something like that, but I was reading, Chris Kressler was discussing that like, it just is, it's much more, I don't know, the fact that your body makes it means that it's just that important, okay? So it's not really to negate the fact that you don't need to eat any type of glucose, okay? It's just to reiterate the fact that it is imperative for your body functions. So needs. I'll get into this a little bit more, but roughly speaking, if you're a healthy individual, so labs are good, you have a good diet, you're active, no metabolic disorders of any sort, and if you don't really know what those might be, you know, it could be something like hypertension or prediabetes or different types of allergies, okay, something going wrong in your body. If you're healthy otherwise, then you actually can have a liberal intake of it. Your body does a pretty good job of maintaining your blood sugar levels and utilizing the glucose effectively if you're a healthy individual. However, with the standard American diet and with most people, unfortunately, this is not the case. So unhealthy means years of eating toxins like refined cereal grains, industrial seed oils, fructose, and that means that the glucose is not properly cleared, and it may lead to insulin resistance, which I'll get into in a little bit here too. So maybe even if you're healthy now, years of poor habits may still have an effect on you. So that's why we kind of, I mean, this here, the recommendation is 400 kilocalories or 100 grams a day. Don't take that for gold. Everybody's different. But this was kind of a generic recommendation for folks that are pretty unhealthy in metabolic terms. Okay.
So,
yes.
just real quick, I'm just interested in the phrase phrase industrial seed oils. I've never heard that phrase. Are there manufactured seed oils that are really super bad for you? I've just never heard that.
Yeah.
Really?
So I'll have to email you my talk from last time because we covered all about the oils last time, and there's actually a handout as well that I can.
That's fascinating because you see on an ingredient list you might see sunflower oil, and it sounds maybe
palm
that's
oil,
good for you.
Okay. Partially hydrogenated oils.
Oh, sure. Okay, I've heard. Yeah, I know
Yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah.
So that's a bad. See, of course, that's bad oil. I didn't know that was like a manufactured thing.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Highly processed.
Okay.
Okay. Fructose. So we may have heard of fructose before and know that it is in fruits, found in fruits. Fructose is also found in vegetables and table sugar and high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is actually 55% fructose, so it's like high fructose corn syrup is only like 55%, but versus 50% because sucrose is 50-50. But it's still a higher amount of fructose in high fructose corn syrup. And I mean, knowing you guys, and I know that what you, all of your experiences looking over nutrition labels and such, I don't need to reiterate the fact that high fructose corn syrup is in so many things that you would not think. You know, ketchup, any type of packaged foods, you know, you'll find it in sodas, anything like that, okay? It hides. So fructose, some of the functions and then also health effects. So it synthesizes glycogen and triglycerides, so fats in your body. It's toxic at high doses. Robert Lustig actually has a really, really interesting talk on fructose, and anyways, I can give that to you guys if anyone's interested. It goes into a far more detail than I'm going to go into right now on fructose's effect on your body. He talks primarily from sources, primarily from like sodas and added sugars and such. But in any case, toxic at high doses, damages proteins, which leads to metabolic disruption, which leads to inflammation and oxidative damage, which is something else we talked a little bit last time. So the body shunts it to the liver after that, and it can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which can also in turn damage your liver, lead to cirrhosis and liver failure, okay? As well as metabolic syndrome. It's not well absorbed in the gut, which leads to rapid fermentation by bacteria in your gut and abnormal overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine. This is also known as something called SIBO, so small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Lots of research being done around SIBO currently, and it's now thought to be the major cause of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. So something that I learned about fructose a while ago was how fructose actually does not produce an insulin response, and it has a really low glycemic index, which originally was really interesting for research around use with diabetics, because it's sweet, we can use fructose now to sweeten things and not be affected with our blood sugar. But now we know more about fructose and the potential damages that a high intake may have on the body, so it's not really a favored sweetener. Gout incidence also increases with increased consumption. So I found an interesting handout that I want to give you guys as well about fructose in different kinds of fruits as well. So there's a distribution of fructose and sucrose or glucose in fruits. So for example, an apple has a lot more fructose than glucose versus a strawberry or something like that, okay? Similar with a banana. much more fructose. So it can be useful and helpful when you are choosing fruits if you're particularly concerned about this. But 3 to 4 servings of fruit per day for healthy people. And again, when I say healthy people, I'm referring to my description earlier. And everyone should avoid high fructose corn syrup though, and other concentrated sources. Actually, agave syrup is the concentrated source of fructose. I didn't know that. Okay, just gonna touch on fiber a little bit here. So fiber is plant matter. It's indigestible to humans, but it is digestible for our bacteria in our gut, which is why fiber is just so helpful for our digestive process. Little bit of difference between grain fiber and plant fiber. Grain fiber is actually prone to injure the intestinal wall, and plant fiber tends to be a little bit more beneficial. Okay, it can lead to a healthier gut. So fiber is actually not essential. We just tend to utilize it a bit more because our guts are so compromised as of late with the current diet and the compromised foods and such that we eat, even if we are trying to eat really healthy, and which is frustrating, but it was kind of interesting to me. I found out that it's not essential. Human breast milk has no fiber. And if you have too much of an increase of intake, it can not only feed the good bacteria, but then also the bad bacteria in your gut. So you want to be a little bit careful about that. Recommended intake is a ½ pound of vegetables per day. I got this again from that particular recommendation from Chris Kresser. And if you guys don't know who that is, he's a very, very well researched doc who compiles research in different areas and breaks it down. And so oftentimes research can get published and it's just a load of crap, meaning they just didn't do a very good job highlighting the subjects or the process, and so the conclusions are a little skeptical. So here's the carb food pyramid. Again, I think that you guys have a general idea of that already, but a visual is always nice. So talking about carbs a little bit more, and they're kind of the war on carbs. They've sort of gotten a bad rep as of late, and so I want to cover this a little bit. So are carbs the most efficient fuel source for the body? Well, they are utilized to make ATP or energy the fastest, okay? Your heart utilizes fat and your brain actually utilizes ketone bodies and glucose. Fat is only the most efficient when there's no glucose available. So I actually was reading this article that kind of explained this pretty well, where say you have stored food in the freezer, and then again prepped meals or something in your refrigerator. So the food in the freezer can be also known as the fat stores in your body, and the food in the refrigerator is more so like the glucose and the ready glycogen stored. So first you go to the food in the fridge and deplete that before you then go to the food in the freezer to utilize that. So for any kind of energy, or in the analogy, eating. So it's similar with your body. If you have glucose available, your body will utilize that. If you don't have it readily available, it will tap into your fat stores. Okay? Not always. Right now, you guys are burning fat. Just sitting, doing moderate activity, jogging for long distances lightly, that also burns more fat than glucose. But everyone is different, and this is something that I really want to highlight. Okay, everyone really needs different amounts of carbohydrates in how they function the most optimally in terms of their energy and their metabolic functions in their body. Okay, so I'm not necessarily advocating for some super low carb diet or high carb diet. It's important that you understand where you land, and it's also important to know the sources, okay? So I wanted to touch on insulin sensitivity really quick because we were just discussing a little bit the war on carbs, and with a really high carbohydrate intake, you may be more susceptible to developing insulin sensitivity and then therefore insulin resistance and potentially type 2 diabetes, okay? Or prediabetes. So insulin is an anabolic hormone. That's another word for just saying storage and building, okay? So otherwise it's catabolic, where you break things down. So it lowers blood sugar, pulls glucose out of the bloodstream. It promotes muscle protein synthesis, inhibits breakdown of body fat into free fatty acids. So you don't burn fat when insulin is on board. That's an important mark. Glucose is always handled first, then lipolysis, which is breakdown of fat. So your pancreas produces insulin when you eat glucose, eat sugar of any kind, okay? But sometimes a person's body develops this sensitivity. So the cells don't respond to the insulin in your system, which means that the glucose in your system doesn't get taken into the cells, okay? So you have this high blood sugar, and then you also have high circulating insulin. So your pancreas still sees the high blood sugar and releases more insulin, so you get more and more insulin, and it basically just gets exhausted from needing to produce so much insulin, because you need this crazy amount more insulin to somehow get the high blood sugars into your cells. Does that make sense? Like if you're sensitive, you basically don't you don't utilize the insulin in your system to absorb more or less the sugar into your body, and so your pancreas just goes crazy and starts producing more and more and more, because all it knows is that your blood sugar is high. Okay, so so a few things happen when your insulin stays elevated like that. Fat doesn't get broken down. Susceptible brain, artery, and pancreatic cells are exposed to a high blood sugar. Protein synthesis declines. Glycogen is replenished slowly, so cells full of glycogen, and there's nowhere to put the glucose. It just goes into fat storage. So this happens most often with folks that are, you see it most often with folks that are overweight, right? It's highly related to type 2 diabetes and obesity, but it's not always the case. There are people that have type 2 diabetes that are actually not overweight. So anyways, that's just kind of an important marker to understand with a high carbohydrate intake. So protein. Sources: animal products, seafood, nuts, legumes, and grains. Protein is the most satiating nutrient. It upregulates metabolic rate and stabilizes blood sugar. I want to talk about bioavailability, because I'm just going to reference that in a couple of slides as well. And it's important when understanding sources of protein and why some may be better than others. So bioavailability is basically just how much protein and amino acids you're getting from what you eat. So, but it's not, I mean, it's not exclusive to protein, but basically just whatever you're eating gets actually absorbed into your system. That has a high bioavailability, okay? So some nutrients can be bound up in fibers, like plant proteins, okay? So then they're less bioavailable. There are essential and non-essential amino acids. So amino acids are the smallest form of proteins, right? So when you have a bunch of amino acids, that's just a bunch of protein. And the non-essential amino acids are the ones that you need to eat. Essential, the essential ones you actually produce yourself. Wait, I think I had that backwards. Non-essential amino acids are the ones that you produce your own self, and essential you need to eat otherwise. So animal proteins. So these animal proteins contain all essential amino acids needed to build proteins within the body. Just a couple other things about animal proteins that make them preferable. They're rich in zinc and heme iron, so those are more readily absorbed than iron in plants, more bioavailable, okay? More bang for your buck, basically. I mean, 10 to 30 grams of protein per serving. I put eggs in parentheses just because that's probably the lowest gram per serving with protein, just because the other sources, I mean, you're getting at least like 15 to 30 grams per serving. And then eggs, it's only about 6 per egg. More bioavailable than plants. Good source of B12, which plays a crucial role in function of brain and nervous system. It's a cofactor for methylation, which turns genes on and off. Found in organ meat, red meat, and shellfish. So in contrast to vegetable proteins, we have soy and quinoa, and those actually do contain all essential amino acids. Got to be kind of careful with soy intake though, because of how soy and isoflavones resemble estrogen and can kind of mess with hormones. There's a bit of research around that. Legumes and grains offer 4 to 10 grams of protein per serving. However, they contain toxic compounds that can damage the gut. So I'll go into the legumes in a little bit. The toxins can be partially or completely neutralized by traditional preparation methods though, like soaking, sprouting, or fermenting. Okay. So legumes, there's been a lot of talk with legumes and the paleo diet and the, what's the deal with them? So basically, one of the arguments around intake of legumes is that you're just not getting the nutrient density that you could get with other sources of protein, okay? Additionally, original arguments against legumes and the paleo diet revolved around the fact that legumes contain lectins, which can cause leaky gut and inflammation. The studies that was based off of were animal studies in which the animals were fed just tons and tons of raw legumes. Okay, so lectins are actually destroyed by heat and cooking. And you know what I had said previously with the other traditional preparation methods, those can also alleviate the damaging effect. However, they can still be potentially damaging when they're not carefully prepared. And peanuts are a legume, and they are often eaten raw. So something to consider, they do have lectins. Each legume is unique though, and so I'm not sure, I think some of you guys were doing Whole30, where the reason for like taking the legumes out, right, the Whole30 doesn't allow legumes, right? Or it does? No. It doesn't, okay, yeah. So legumes, and then the same reason there's potential curiosity around nightshades, and because of the lectins, okay, and eggs, all are related to lectins. And so each legume that you may be introducing back into your diet has a unique profile. So legumes shouldn't be just bunched together. When, if you may react to a black bean differently than you react to a kidney bean or peas or something like that. And additionally, if you react right away, if you eat just a bowl of black beans and your gut freaks out, that's not necessarily indicative of being sensitive to it. Okay, you actually can acclimate to the reintroduction of the food. So if you do it slowly and properly, you can, like, that's a much better way to do it, to actually see if you have a reaction than just doing a ton at one time. Protein powders. So protein powders are processed food. There are so many of them, and they're just filled with weird ingredients and all across the board. And so reason to use protein powders for muscle, you know, it's a post-workout drink. Oftentimes, they can also be supplemental throughout the day. Restore muscle protein and glycogen. Protein powders can contain MSG. They're processed through extremely high heat, which denatures protein to an extent that may increase its carcinogenic load. Whey protein powders come from waste product of cheese making or grain-fed waste. So the best type of protein powders are often ones from, you know, grass-fed animals, except that they're just a little bit more expensive, but non-denatured whey is also better. There's a hydrolyzed beef protein powder that I have never tried, but I was reading about, and it tends to be like the most preferred, except that it's wildly expensive. But it's pre-digested, so it's more bioavailable. No whey, also, if people are concerned about whey. Dairy. Okay. Are there any questions? Or anything more to elaborate on? I feel like there's something I wanted to elaborate on.
So the protein powders then are not...
You have to get the right one. Like, that's what, like, they're often just have a lot of weird stuff in them. I mean, you'll see what with the ones here, very, very, very simple, right? Which is kind of a pretty common trait when we're looking at preferred foods and such, and looking at packages and ingredients. So wanting to keep everything pretty simple is usually the way to go. But yeah.
And not just because it's food as opposed to powder.
Likely, yeah. It just, yeah. I would always say that, but it's just hard sometimes. But yeah.
So if you're going to choose a protein powder, probably whey, not soy.
Yes. Unless you have some like intolerance to casein, the protein in whey, and in which case, like, I don't know. I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on like pea protein and cricket protein, but I just didn't find anything that was like, I don't know, sources that I trusted, I suppose, that were talking about them, and so it might be worth looking into a little bit more, but I've heard pretty good things. Kurt said there's like a cricket protein bar or something, I don't know. Oh yeah?
The powder and the bars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've considered, I haven't actually tasted one, but I've heard they taste well, the cricket bars. But I've considered carrying them here because I do think they would be a good product. But I don't think people would, I think they'd be shy away because of the cricket aspect. But like Therese said, like all of our stuff that we do carry is for that reason, and it is simple. The Rise bars have at the most 5 ingredients in them. The whey protein, the unflavored, has 1.5 ingredients, I would say. And the half being that it has lecithin, which is keeps it from clumping up or something. Like everything's gonna have a whey protein, but it's just whey isolate, which is a top tier form of whey. The highest tier would be like hydro isolate, which would have absolutely 0 lactose in it. But again, you're gonna pay a lot more for it. So as far as price wise goes, it's also it's low heat. So it's non-denatured protein, what they call cold processed, which is why I picked that company to use versus anything else out there. Why I steered away from Isopure, because they do not use high or cold processing. They use high heat, which is what most companies do. And if you look at the label ingredient on most of the protein bottles, the first ingredient is whey concentrate, or it's definitely the second ingredient, where that only uses whey isolate, which is again a much purer form of whey that only has trace amounts of lactose. If you're
Any other questions?
What again was the advantage to sprouted grain?
Preparation method of yeah. Destroying lectins.
Okay, so is that like sprouting after it's been brought in or while it's still grown?
I'm not sure because I haven't ever actually done it. I would have to look into like the process itself. But I would just say if you're gonna eat legumes, just soak them and like go through that whole process.
Yeah.
And make sure that that's yeah.
I mean, 'cause I've seen sprouted like in
Ezekiel
this.
bread or something.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
It's and I don't. I guess it's interesting simply because I mean, just from an agricultural standpoint,
Right.
when we turn in sprouted grain, it's a huge dockage, huge
Oh.
price drop that we get. So you know, if the price of wheat is $5 out of Portland, you know, it's huge. It's like a $2-3 drop.
Mm.
Yet you go to the store and that bread is far more expensive. Than, it's like
Yeah.
Backwards.
How's that?
Yeah.
Hell is
You're
going
like,
on
wait
here?"
a second. Getting ripped off, Brenda.
Is it what, heavier then, like if it's sprouted?
Yeah, because there's a lot more moisture.
Yeah. It must be where some of that drop comes from.
Well, when we turn it in, it has to be at a certain. It has to be low temperature. And if it's higher than that, they don't want it.
But how do they, is it
Can you go back to the
quantity and weight? Like how do they determine $5?
So which one?
Every sample, every truck you
First reading,
take in,
second one or third
sample
one?
is taken.
Mhm.
And they test it right here on the spot.
Mhm.
And then when it gets to a
Oh.
certain level.
But are they
I'm
weighing?
coming up 'cause I can't see
So
it.
they're
Yeah,
weighing.
yeah. If you weigh the truck.
Okay, I got confused.
Yeah.
And
When
it's
you were
for
talking, you
sure
went into high fructose corn syrup. And
worse
then down
deal
here
for
it's
you
toxic.
because if it weighs more because it has more weight.
Fructose,
Yeah,
yes.
Or-
if
Fructose itself,
weighs more,
this is fructose. All of this is not fructose.
Oh, okay, 'cause
Yep.
But percentage of moisture.
But
I
high
gotta
consumption
turn
of high
around.
fructose corn syrup is like
I
the
don't
main reason we even know this is because
Yeah, that's weird.
that's what
Yeah, I was
people
just
That
trying
shit
to
and everything.
Yeah.
It's at the hospital. Everything they cook with at the hospital.
It's more expensive.
No,
It's
that's
ridiculous.
Really don't want to work there.
Sprouted is great.
It's difficult. You look at the
Yeah.
food and look at
Well, as a dietitian to work there, yeah, like I can't. I have to like.
job to turn
You
it
know,
on.
And the dietitians are in the cafeteria. Their office is behind where they meal prep.
Yeah.
And everything they use is like the Heinz ketchup with high fructose corn syrup, the crappy peanut butter.
And they have to though. Like that's the other thing. I mean, some of them may not care as much, or they like, or whatever. But it's like you have to use that because of this, like the USDA standards.
Well,
and
it's the
stuff.
cost too.
Yeah.
I don't
That-
know. It's one that
Astronomical.
I did eat. I don't know. I think I've heard sourdough is
Not very often. It
the
hurts.
better form of bread.
It's
And
cold.
Ezekiel, I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know if it's better.
So what are good fruits that you recommend then?
I was actually just gonna pull. I feel like I have a couple things I wanted you guys to.
It's really good
So
over
that-
at Alpine Beach Road, and then I get the liverwurst. I put that.
Not a liverwurst. My dad loves that stuff.
It's the best way to have liver. I haven't had liver that I like, but liverwurst.
I actually don't think I've ever tried liverwurst.
There's several
Oh my
different ones.
gosh.
Like if that Alpine Bistro right down the street here, the little European store, they've got like 5 or 6 different kinds. They've got goose and cow and pig, all kinds of.
What was that crazy lunch meat that Drew had? The blood something.
Legumes?
I don't know. It was good though.
Blood sausage.
Jared,
is it
Jared
blood
was afraid of
sausage?
it. Yeah, he wouldn't eat it, but I did. It was really good. It looked horrible. Looked like
fake
fake.
legumes.
So I still watched. Is that none?
I think so.
I do get that at that Alpine Bistro too. Though. There's called bloodwurst,
What it's called?
blood in town.